Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Roar Rugby Podcast. Christy Doran here, and I'm up in Brisbane at Ballymore, the heart of Queensland Rugby. And I'm about to be joined by a special guest, a man who's come back after 15 years abroad coaching overseas with Ireland, Ulster and London Irish. And he's the man that is taking over from Brad Thorn as the Queensland Reds coach. So without further ado, let's get in there and speak to a Queensland great. Well, it's a very warm welcome to the Roar Rugby Podcast. Let's kiss. You're in Ballymore. You're on the eve of the Super Rugby season. You must be getting excited.
Yeah, that's one word for it. I'm excited, as are the coaching team. You know, we've come together over the last 2 or 3 months and worked with the lads, and they've put their hand up and worked very hard. But we're like every other state. We've all worked hard and full of ambition and hopes and dreams about where it can go. But the reality hits us very soon. So it's exciting. I think it could be a really good competition this Super Rugby season.
We're going to go back in time a little bit because it was a number of decades ago. Sorry to bring up your age, but it was a few decades ago. You were pulling on a slightly different Reds jersey, probably more of a maroon kind of tinge to it. But did you ever see yourself when you're playing for the Queensland Maroons and North Sydney Bears? Did you ever see yourself transitioning to rugby union?
Truthfully, no. I did see myself at one stage, particularly when I had my injuries, that coaching was something that was a possibility for me. I've basically been a career coach, really. That's what I've been, a player into a coach, really. I did a bit of odd jobs here and there and worked for a poker machine company at one stage at the end of my career, who was a sponsor of the club at the Bears. But it's quickly moved to working with the academy systems there with the Bears in the first grade area of coaching. The bug got me early and I've stayed in it for the last 25, 30 years. But was rugby on the radar early? No. But I certainly thought this was something I'd love to do, and in terms of coaching.
Totally. Here we are in 2024. Why do you think you went down a coaching route in rugby union and not rugby league?
It wasn't so much by chance, but there was an opportunity that opened up in terms of a good mate of mine. We'd coached against each other and coached together at the Northern Eagles at the time. Was contacted by the South African Rugby about the opportunity to be coach someone that he knew, or if he could coach there and help them out, particularly with attacking areas and defensive areas. And that guy was Frank Panisi, who I work with, and I ended up just by virtue of an opportunity that was there, and I thought, why not? We started off with a 6-week contract. Increased to another further 10 weeks, and then suddenly it's nearly a 2-year contract with the Springboks, and that's where it all started. Weird, challenging, but I guess it was really formative about me getting a bug for what rugby was about. That's for sure.
Yeah. Frank Panisi, pretty well known in rugby league circles still, particularly with the Melbourne Storm, if I'm not mistaken. You grow up and you're from Queensland and you're playing rugby league. Did, like at school, boy level, or did you play rugby union, or were you ever tempted by it?
The temptations around the edges and dabbled on a couple of things. That was the amateur age.
Yeah.
You get a bit of money for playing league. You can't play here, or the league team would say. It was back in Bundy, but they would say you shouldn't be doing anything with union. Make sure, because we pay you and we don't want to get injured. You know what I mean? So it was. You always wanted to play every sport as a kid. Soccer. It wasn't so much Aussie rules up there, but you always watched it. And cricket. You wanted to be part of everything, didn't you? Go down the beach, get out and surf, whatever. So I guess that was just the genuine curiosity and the way that most of us like to live. If you were quite sporty, to try everything out, but once you got a little bit of traction in the game and in rugby league, you start going down that track and you start to get really serious about it. So it just became a one game for me, and that's try to be best I could be in league. And fortunate enough to have some good people who mentored me along the way, but also took me on and gave me opportunities. which I'm grateful for, because all those were learning opportunities, and to be able to experience those things been fantastic, and it certainly helped be part of why I'm here now.
North Sydney Bears, I know that there's a lot of people that wish that club would be back in existence. I'm sure you're among those. What about when you're playing a handful of games for the Queensland Maroons, and do you still get stopped down the street every now and again about, remember those days?
It'd have to be someone pretty old who calls me up. I think it's more my name gets remembered at times. It's an odd name, I guess. If that's brought out, there's some people who definitely remember the name more clearly than just a normal name. So that certainly helps in that terms. Whether it's help, I'm not sure. You have to be reminded you're that old is not not always good. But it's brought up here more so than anywhere. I play for Fortitude Valley, the rugby league club here, and when I've met people since I've been back in Brisbane, that's always brought up the old Valleys days, and from there, I under Peter McQuirter, actually, who was the coach there at the time, helped me get to the North Sydney Bears, and I was very lucky the following year to be able to represent the Maroons. And that is, it's a boyhood dream to pull that jersey on, and to have that opportunity was fantastic. To play at Lang Park, brilliant. I didn't get everything out of that journey as I would have liked to because I had some injuries, but I was fortunate enough to be considered good enough to wear that jersey and the Aussie jersey afterwards.
Well, I speak to a lot of coaches today, and even your predecessor, Brad Thorn. A mentor of his was Wayne Bennett. Who did you have as mentors, perhaps, that kind of led you towards a coaching path, or what were those experiences like playing for the Maroons? Because we know it's such a cauldron, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a good question, because I probably had an influence on a couple of people that did make a difference for not only sparking that interest in coaching, but also consolidating how I would go about it and what I should do. I've mentioned Peter McQuirter earlier, but he played for the Maroons. He was coach of the Fortitude Valley team, and he brought me in, and he helped me move to the North Sydney Bears. But his style of coaching made me appreciate the fundamentals of my position really strongly. I ended up with the Bears. The likes of Chicken Norton and Frank Stanton were really key, but another coach in Steve Martin, who was a coach that really piqued my interest in terms of the further detail and technicalities of the game and the things that made a difference, was very influential in terms of where I went as a player, particularly where I had injuries. And when you have injuries, you work at a different level. You're on the sideline. You look at the game differently, and that's when I just started to look at the game differently, think of it deeply, and add my value with the team as much as I could then. So that influence was massive for me. You mentioned Wayne Bennett before. I think I only had 2 Origin games under Bennett because I had the injuries and came back. But he was my first 2 Origins games before I went on a kangaroo tour and then got injured and didn't get back in for a while. But it's funny, you learn. He wasn't so much a mentor, but he had an influence to this day. I always remember he sat me down in the hotel room, and just a couple of words of wisdom to this isn't, you haven't made anything yet. This is just a start. And it just always made me think that the important thing is whatever you achieve, it's always a new starting point. And sometimes you get selected in a team. I always keep this message to players: just because you got selected doesn't mean it's an end point. It's another starting point. And I've always taken that on from what Bennett said that day, and said, stay focused on what you're good at, stay keen, all those things. The road forward's better than the road behind you, in terms of where you want to go. Learn the lessons, move forward. So he was good. But my major influences were those coaches that just took time, and particularly when I had my injuries, to allow me to work with them and learn off them. And then I just forged my own pathway from there in the academy systems with the Bears. Worked with the Bears first grade, went to the London Broncos, came back, joined the Northern Eagles, Norths and Manly joining up. And that's when that turned quickly. As I said earlier, with Frank Panisi, I had a chat to him. I ended up with the Springboks, and that's where my rugby journey started.
Someone like a Wayne Bennett, obviously very well known in this part of the world, but he's probably just down the road. Have you bumped into him since you returned?
No, I haven't yet. I'll definitely make a chance to go out and see him and see if he remembers remembers me, but he'd be as busy as I am. I'd say it is interesting. You want to try and catch up with people, but you are so you're driven by different schedules and in trying to get things done. I've been busy trying to connect with a lot of stakeholders in the game. Particularly here in Queensland, ensuring that the coaching team going well, because they're all Zane's back to Brisbane after a long time away. Jonathan Fisher and Brad Davis have not been here and lived in Brisbane, so they've had to find their feet. So there's a lot of things getting right in terms of making sure the group are good, connecting with the professional staff, connecting with the QRU and all the stakeholders outside the club game. It's been busy, but I guess at some stage, I'll take a breath and maybe go and watch a game or a training session or two and connect up with Benny at some stage.
I imagine it's not going to be for a little while, given that the Super Rugby season it comes up quickly. It's less than a month away now.
Yeah. It is exciting. The truth is, a lot of things now are still a bit of a theory, aren't they? Who are we? What are we? We've got some different structures in place, different ways we looked at the game. So we'll see how that looks against the Force in a fortnight.
We're going to park the Reds just for a second. We'll come back to it. But you've spent a long time after that period, that 18 months or so with the Springboks and throughout South African rugby. You come back to the New South Wales Waratahs, get an opportunity. Bob Dwyer, a World Cup winner, another supremely good mentor, I imagine, for a young coach finding their way. What have you seen in these initial few months with the Reds that are different to what you saw when you were with the Waratahs 2 decades ago, when you've got guys like Chris Whittaker still running around and, young guys like Steve Hoyle's probably coming through the ranks too?
Yeah, that's great to see, by the way. I mean, and Chris spent a lot of time in France too, coaching over that way. Horsey, he's shown his qualities, hasn't he, to be able to win that Shield Championship. But and it doesn't surprise me, those two guys, even Nathan Gray, he's in the coaching realm and worked with a lot of those guys. Even Phil War, coached him, and now he's heading up our country in terms of Rugby Australia. You mentioned Bob and Ewan McKenzie. I worked with Andy Friend at the time. We're all in that same era. Good mentors for me early on in my rugby coaching career. Good people to learn off. I still have gems that I take from Bob's handbook, about little things that just make such a massive difference. But in terms of the differences, I don't know. When I was away for 16, 17 years, a lot of things have moved on, that's for sure. By the time I'd started and finished with the Tars in 2002, 2007, 8, it was healthy here for sure. I'm loath to sort of comment on, why something went down. I don't know. I wasn't in the middle of it all, but there's certainly something that's not adding up, and there seems to be good people, but do we understand our differences, and do we know what common ground will make the most difference? Are we in those conversations enough, or are there too many factions? I believe we just got to find the most positive common space that we all agree that we can move forward together. I think we can make massive moves in 12 or 18 months as a rugby nation in terms of results on the pitch, but also how we build our systems here and get the right alignment, and everyone fighting, from on the same battleground together. I mean, my belief is, rugby league and Aussie rules, don't try and compete with them on the same landscape. Create our landscape and understand our strengths. Our strengths are obvious. None of those games are global. We have an international global presence. Our game definitely offers many more opportunities for individuals of different sizes and shapes to be involved in different ways. So it's massively important to keep recognising the strengths that we do have in that area. And I think one of the most important things is that our game can be played in many different ways. Now, that might frustrate some people because there's a kick focus from some teams, and it can be a set piece focus only, but I think that's the beauty too. And the more that we can recognise how to not let those things overtake the game and get the right blend in our laws and application of laws and those things, and having a willingness of being innovative in our game, that scope that we have in our game, because of many different ways it can be played, I think is an exciting thing about our product that we should be looking at more productively and positively. I mean, instead of lamenting some styles, right? Celebrate why they do that, and they work to their strengths, and they're against, the contrasting styles that can be there. I think they're great stories to have. Yeah, it can get stodgy at times and a bit negative, and we can push that along. But I do think there's a lot to like about our game that maybe we just missed that because we're focused on what we're not too many times.
It was certainly interesting looking at the different styles at last year's World Cup in France, and look, Ian Foster and comments around the Springboks. But at the end of the day, the Boks so successful in what they do. You went to Ireland and you were away from Australia for a long, long time. When you took up that role with the Irish, 2009, did you think that you'd be away for as long as you have been?
I think at the time I didn't know. I hadn't put a timeline on it. The only timeline was the length of the contract. When I was with the Waratahs, I had 1 year contract, 7 years in a row. That was basically what I had. So I worked year to year, basically. Then I got a 3 year contract with Irish Rugby. So I guess that was the only defining timeline I had, was 3 year contract. And that quickly moved to another extension and then an extension, and 10 years later I leave Irish Rugby. So it was a wonderful, beautiful period from a lifestyle perspective, gaining a worldly experience, but in terms of my career, it was definitely an important period for me. To have now probably around 90 test matches under my belt as a coach, and it is only experience that I never dreamed would have happened. So that's been really good for me. But I didn't expect it to be more than 3, because I knew 3 in a coach's life. That's probably luxury. So I got the 3, and I'll be able to extend it to 10, and then move on to the London English Premiership scene for another 6-7 years. Is also a blessing in a way. So yeah, it's a long time, definitely. But I don't take it for granted, that's for sure.
During your tenure with Ireland, you go to a World Cup 2011, a great victory over the Wallabies. Robbie Deans and probably a few people still having nightmares from that, when particularly I think David Pocock missing that crucial match. And how is it when you coach against your country of birth? And that was I imagine it's one of the real highlights, that kind of moment.
Yeah, I remember, because when I was with the Springboks, we played the Wallabies at Pretoria. Skinstad scored a try late to beat, and then we had a draw against them in Perth. So I'd experienced it earlier, but then with the Irish team, to get to World Cup and play them in that game, it's still one of the highlight games. The crowd were unbelievable there, and the travelling support that Irish have, and you saw that in the last World Cup, but they were down here in their droves in New Zealand too. But that was a special victory on a number of levels, for sure. Where you toil and work away with people, where you spill sweat and tears and effort, what you do with someone, that's where you are committed. And coaching is that. Coaching is your profession. And I mean, if you only connect it, it'll only be one country, you won't get very far. It's this is the beauty of the game. It's global. You can maybe towards the end of my career, I can help a team like Georgia or Portugal. Those are the opportunities you have. So, but to represent, to play against your country, it's I don't think it's tough. It's just, you just accept that reality. It's about helping that group of players you're with at that time to do their best. And yeah, I've had some good times against Australia, for sure. A couple of tough ones, but they're always good battles. Ireland versus the Wallabies, that's for sure. I do remember the first game that when I was with the Springboks, my kids were pretty young, but when we were in Ireland, my son and daughter were watching, and they had an Irish scarf on and a Wallaby jersey, and they were twitched in between. But as soon as Ronan O'Gara throws a pass that was intercepted and Australia scored, they both hopped in the air, but then they sat down and suddenly said, no, we don't want that. We want Dad to win. So it's interesting where your loyalties lie. It lies with who you're with at the time. And that doesn't mean you're un-Australian. It just means that you're committed to your craft where you are. And my kids were committed to their dad. And that became more important than support the Wallabies that day. So, and everyone represents that differently, but it's part of your journey, isn't it? And that's one of the beauties the global game to have those experiences and experience those things in different ways.
Certainly, speaking of the global game, second half of that Irish tenure, there's a man called Joe Schmidt who gets appointed as the Irish coach, and remarkably, he's now the Wallabies coach. I was part of the press conference just a couple of days ago where you spoke about he'll be able to cut through the fluff and make an immediate impact with the Wallabies. Do you remember your first few experiences with Joe and what it was like?
Well, Joe joined the Irish system through Leinster first, and when I was there, I worked closely with him on a few things from an Irish perspective, in and out of the club, which I did with all the provinces in Ireland, and he had some really strong success with a lot of lads there. And when it moved on and he became coach, I held the reins for an interim period while he finished off his season, and he came in. So I worked with Joe for around 50 tests, I think, somewhere in that vicinity. I think somewhere around that 40 to 50. We had some good success. Won 2 Six Nations, and I learned a huge deal from him. But he just gets to the things that matter quickly and tries to leverage those things that can really drive the game forward and make an individual understand their role and their job and their accountability and their ownership of something, and in getting those things right, he gets to those things that matter very quickly. The players do then feel a sense of responsibility and accountability to what they've got to do, and it's hard to escape that when it's given in the way that Joe can deliver it, and it makes sense. There's difference it can make a difference. So I'll be familiar with a lot of things, but he's also been out of that system for a while. He's been with the All Blacks. He went back home to New Zealand. Had a lot of success there with working with the Blues and now with and then with the All Blacks. So there'll be new things that he's picked up along the way, and I've got some new things, and we definitely will connect and chew the fat. Obviously, we'll be working closely in that respect for sure. So there's a lot of good things to look forward to with Joe coming there, and I'm not sure when he actually hits the ground, but it'd be good to catch up with him.
It was interesting during his Friday press conference when he was unveiled as the Wallabies coach. He described himself as being boring and perhaps or characterised as being boring and maybe a pragmatist, and probably the complete opposite to Eddie Jones. How would you describe him? Because he's kind of, some people have said that he's a control freak, but other coaches, and I look across the international landscape, I feel like there's a lot of head coaches out there that are kind of eccentric in many ways. And, Eddie Jones is certainly one. Steve Hansen's been another. Rassie Erasmus, of course. Perhaps there's an element that you do need to have that.
We're all weird. We're weird in some way to do what we do. You know what I mean? It's such an invigorating lifestyle to have, to be a coach as an assistant or a specialist coach, but to be a head coach, it's there's another level of weirdness that must arise, because there's a lot around it that you have to manage. And I think Joe has that strength that he can manage a lot of things, and crystallizes the most important things to get done here and now. And he's a very, very smart guy. You talk about any subject with him. You know what I mean? He's a good, interesting man to sit down and chat with, that's for sure. So I wouldn't call him boring, that's for sure. From my perspective, I just find him an interesting guy to work with and talk with and sit down with. But he'll have his way. And that's what I think is the secret to any coach, is that you've got to be yourself as much as you can, and then know how your way can connect people together and get them on the same page, and then forge something that means something to all of us together. So Joe will have his way, he does that, and it works. And he's very good at being able to help guys understand how they can become better, or how they can negate the habits that are probably not as good as they would like. So he's got a good way of being able to do those things. So I'm looking forward to the whole thing. If we get the right things aligned in the game too, we're totally different to any other market. I wouldn't try and cut and paste what Irish Rugby have done or anyone like that. I'm pretty sure Peter Thorn, who's coming on, will also understand that there's differences here. not only geographically but demographically as well. There's so many differences. So we will find the right way forward for sure if we all get to get around the table and agree what those things, the important things are.
You spent time at Ulster, you go to London Irish, not necessarily winning titles, but along the way, real steady progress. And, you could see that. You could see the coach development. You could see the player development, players getting picked for England, a really successful young froth of players that came through London Irish, particularly even the Henry Arundels, classy players. How do you coaching is such a cutthroat industry where sometimes you're judged as successful or a failure depending on whether or not you win a title or not. How do you perceive success as a head coach where there's only ever one winner per competition per year?
It's a really important question, I think. The churn and burn of coaches is a tough world, and sometimes understanding and crystallizing what success really is important. The truth is, what's a 12-team comp here? Yeah, only one team can win it. Over 12 years, one team's going to probably win it 3 times. So then it's reduced. Does that mean you're not successful if you don't win one? So the ultimate success is to win the trophy, but you have to understand what the other successes are along the way, and that's probably unique for every team in certain ways. Your program, your development program, number of wallabies, for example. But it's what it is. Because South Africa win the World Cup, and there's how many countries play the game, does that mean every other country is not successful somewhere? And I think there are important questions you've got to ask internally about your program and where you are. But the bottom line is the scoreline at the end of the day is your big barometer. And that's how exciting part of it, I find. That the report card comes often and hard, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, and navigating through that's important. But I think, Lou Holtz, Notre Dame football coach, had a great saying about WIN win. What's important now? What's the imperative now? WIN. And if you have that focus, you can win moments. And then if you get good enough, you can win enough good moments to get that trophy. Now, a lot of people discount the big word luck. Sometimes you need a bit of luck to get there as well. But there are some really big clues about good programs that you stay sustainably good enough to be at the table enough times. And that table being finals contentions, home finals, things like that are really good markers about where a good team knows how to win those games enough to get yourself to those points where sometimes it can be just the bounce of a ball, but sometimes you actually get that momentum going and you're good enough to go through. I remember the periods of the Six Nations. Irish rugby hadn't won anything for a long time, and in my first season there, we won the Grand Slam, first one for 60 odd years, and suddenly it just opened up, and within the next 10 years we win another 3 or 4. It's interesting how those things happen. So some teams are just trying to work and stay there, and if you actually have the idea that if you don't win that trophy, then you slash and burn everything, then that's not a success, because you haven't put things in place and had trust in the process, and you had good communications and good organisation, good systems, and growing people in the club and in the game. It all tends to land on the coach, and we are responsible and accountable in the end. We are the head coach, but there are a lot of things that can be put in place that you can see the success in certain areas. And then if you do move a coach on, you actually just growing on top of that success. If it's just slash them and then start from scratch again, there's something else is wrong. So success has to be broader, understood, but without escaping. The ultimate is that trophy, but you can get hijacked by that too. And you've got to know how to put a program together, build it, and have other success touch points along the way, and understand that. And that'll be different for every team and every club. Probably some things are common, but each coach will have their own personal reason about what is showing those success guideposts along the way.
Might come back to that in a moment. I want to ask, when you win a Grand Slam with Ireland, how much Guinness do you end up consuming, and do you get just bought Guinness left, right, and centre by all the punters?
I remember the first one. I was fortunate enough to have 3, and each of them just become bigger than each time. But the first one being the Grand Slam, I don't think I put my hand in my pocket for at least a month. Yeah, and I love a Guinness.
But I like two and then move on. But I would have drank more Guinness than I ever did in that month. But it because that is the important thing. I think, Christy, there's so many people who put their life into the game. You know what I mean? Or, even in every sport, you just invest in it as supporters or some form of stakeholder in the game. And when you see that joy come through, you do take it seriously. You have a responsibility, and when you get that point and that joy, it's amazing. I mean, there's nothing more fulfilling, and that's just talking about the fan base and the supporters and the sponsors and all those people, but the staff and the players. It's absolutely brilliant, and to reach those points is something you should always aspire to. But you must recognise along the journey that there are important things that you've also achieved, and if you've got to have that capacity to do that, but not be. You'll never be totally happy, but you've got to show enough appreciation and happiness and achievement in how you go about your business when you reach certain things and you achieve certain things along the way. But there's nothing better than winning it. That's for sure.
I have here, of course, just quickly as well. I sat down with David Nusafora maybe 14 months ago in Dublin when I was over there before the test in November 2022, and Nasi told me a little bit about Christy Moore coming in to talk to the side every now and again, and that's in fact who I'm named after. Is Christy
Moore.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, he's a legend, mate.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about who this person might be, and did he come in often?
Yeah, well, he came in every year. I was there for 8 years, 9 years. Yeah, so he would just come in and set up a guitar, a speaker system, and sometimes with no speaker system, it was just a tight room, and he just played the folk songs. He sings about the heart of Ireland. You know, I mean, he's a poet and with a guitar, and he's got some great songs, and it's quite fascinating when you become Irish in that way, particularly through those mechanisms that I was involved in. I remember going out with the staff, and you have a few beers, and then you end up in a circle, and there's 8 or 10 to you. You're expected to sing or tell a poem at the end of the night, and it's great crack. One of the greatest words in the English language, by the way, crack, C-R-A-I-C. It's great crack, but he'd get in there and he'd sing, and then he'd go, Ronan, you up for one? And the boys go, oh. So then Ronan would go up and sing his favourite song with him, you know what I mean? And Donna Callaghan, the boys would put their hand up and go up. Half a dozen guys would sing, but we'd all sing in the songs that you knew. But those moments were really special. He was a constant, really, and just a real comforting way that he'd come into a tough campaign and sing some songs where he relaxed and spend some time with him. But he is a true gentleman. Loved the guy. He was great and just always very personable and gave his time freely. So you're named after a pretty special guy.
Those sorts of little things, though, are quite big for cultures and teams, and I'm sure you bring that back to Queensland, and perhaps we don't have that same Irish culture with singing and getting around the room. But what are some of the things that you've done in this pre-season with Queensland coming back?
Yeah, it's a really good question because the first thing I've tried to do is understand Queensland rugby where it is now. I didn't know it intimately when I was here previously, but the biggest thing I've probably tried to lean on is tying our close ties to this place, Ballymore, and understanding it better. And the games that we've had here, just enriching the guys in terms of the history of the place. I know we've always prepared here, but now it is becoming a place that's going to grow again. It's a rebirth of the spiritual home, isn't it, of the game here in Queensland, if not, really a really formative part of when Australian rugby is strong, Ballymore's strong. And I think those are the key things we've tapped into. Definitely, I want to engage more with some past greats, that's for sure. We can't not recognise enough some of the people who've donned the jersey, and people are important. I think it's one of the strengths of someone like Munster. Munster is a great brand, but if you're a Munsterman and you've played and you come back to that club, there's a sense of real meaning about that. Donna O'Callaghan walked into the Munster Performance Centre now. He it wouldn't be bow and all that. It'd just be matter of fact. This is an important man here who gave his heart and soul to the club, and just a recognition of the importance of what your legacies that you leave behind, and people come back and remind you of that. It's important. So I would like to encourage that a little bit more here, that people feel really connected with us, and that they're welcome here, particularly if you've actually worn the jersey and bled in it. I think that's important. But that Ballymore, the fact that Ballymore is now even more centre stage is important for us. And I'll tap into more things around those things, but I have some really, really good quality players that really appreciate where they are. They're a young group still. Brad's really forged together a group of guys who care about the place. And now I just want to make a difference where I can. And part of that is to try and understand where we've come from, but also more importantly, understand how we take something forward and leave something really, really special going forward for people.
It's still pretty young. The age demographic is still pretty young.
Yeah.
I imagine, Brad Thorn was probably criticised for not being able to take that side to the next level, but there was certainly a good base and foundation put in place. What are some of the things that you discovered when you arrived at Ballymore, and some of the things that are going well, and perhaps some of the things that do need to just, be fixed a little bit?
The first thing I look at, and it's not an excuse for where they were, but where they prepared, and some of the environments they had to work on was challenging for a start. That's the reality, and I think they did exceptionally well with also I've got a different start, haven't I? I've got a new facility. We can manage heat training a bit better with the environment we have here. The fact that the position that you had to work through in terms of reducing debt, a different modus operandi in terms of the business model, are all different things that I don't have that. I have a different model to work with. It's still we're still very cost focused and making sure we don't live beyond our means, and we try and keep those in the right place. So all those things matter and how you can build things. But despite all that, there's a qualities within not only the playing group but the professionals, rugby staff, and people in the QRU. They're just good people who want to make a difference. So what difference can I make? I guess I just had to come here and not try and be just a total change agent. I just didn't want to be that. I wanted to recognise some of the qualities that are here. I think there are some strong qualities, but how do I grow those qualities that are unique to the group that I brought here, a new coaching team? How do those qualities relate to how we want to look at the game and build something important together? So I've been very collaborative in terms of including a lot of people about how we want to take this forward. I certainly have my convictions about the style, or the I don't know, styles, or the way that we explore how good we can be in terms of what we have as our skill sets and our strengths. I certainly have those, but the coaches were up to their eyeballs in how we forged that, and the key players have been up to their eyeballs in how we bring that to life. So I just think I want to make sure they feel they've done their last 3 or 4 years in different levels of different players as they've grown, and they're still a bunch of young guys, really, but they do that justice, and I don't want that to be missed. That doesn't mean we can win suddenly, but it certainly means that it's got to be driven to another level of how they make sure they leverage that opportunity that they were provided with under probably the greatest legend, wasn't he, Brad? He's an absolute legend, a good bloke, and he put something important together. So let's not let that down.
Yeah, and he's got so many phenomenal characteristics, and hard work and discipline are some of those as well. There was a bit of a perception that some players weren't able to make that next step in terms of their own player development. And I don't know how much you watched. I remember you saying you watched most of the games from last year, but a Jordan Bataille that burst on the scene in 2017, goes to 2 World Cups. How much has he improved over that 5 to 6 years is perhaps questionable. Harry Wilson may be another one. Scott Robertson saying, I'm fallen in love with this guy and his footwork. How much has he improved since he burst on the scene in 2020? Do you, like, in your experiences of coachings, is it sometimes just saying things in a different way, or is it just subtle technique changes? Is it a liberation of how you play? How might you get those players to perhaps fulfill their potential?
Yeah. And it's a good question. I think part of everything you mentioned, really, there's little bits of all of those things. I've had some players who have played for me. For some reason they move on. There's never been a real, moment where we didn't quite fit, but they move on and they become better somewhere. And sometimes it's the group of people in the environment you work with, a different way it's messaged and they get it, or that type of time to mature is there. I don't think there's a complete answer for that, but I do. What I've tried to do is ensure that these guys are involved in what we're doing, that I create an intensity of training environment so they can really explore how they fit. We have our principles that are really forward, strong principles that they attach to. So they're different principles, but that might be just a thing that just opens up another portal in their mindset that they can find that another level. There's not one complete answer, and it's not because something didn't exist before. It's just because something new is a way that cuts through something that he wasn't capable of at the time. And that might be a personal thing, it might be a professional thing, it might be a technique thing. They're all different. But Geordie, part of the responsibility for him is I'm a two World Cup veteran. He's bloody young still. I couldn't believe how young he is still. But you have to, don't live your age, live your experience. Bring your experience to the table every time. Be the point of difference that you can every time. And that's my conversations around where these possibilities lie. Age is just what it is. Your experience is the other thing. I mean, and that's what you've got to be able to bring in and understand where that's taking you. You've got to reflect on, and everyone has to, as a coach, you do as well. But you reflect on how's that going to make me better tomorrow. And don't, just because you've had 2 World Cups doesn't mean it's done right. How does it really live in its daily application in how you do your job and how you go about stuff? And even that may be something that just excites him at a different level. But he is capable, more than capable, of just being one of the world-class players in the back line. Definitely.
You said before we came in, the start of this interview, you kind of touched upon, you think there are some really positive things in Australian rugby. There has been a fair bit of doom and gloom in the game, and obviously the Wallabies showing last year didn't reflect perhaps where Australian rugby is, but maybe it also shined a spotlight on some of the things that were going wrong. What gives you confidence coming back into Australian rugby after so long around the direction of the game?
Whatever program you do get lost in that program. You don't see the wood for the trees for everything else. But if you're in an international game, you look at the internationals and you're looking at all the other teams, but you're looking at yourself when you're in a competition in the URC or for a while, or in the Premiership. You are very much into that mindset, that cocoon of how you go in relation to your challenges there. So I watched Australian rugby and international rugby a bit more, but particularly Australian rugby, and saw the qualities there. But we're an innovative, our quality of play is second to none when we get it right. So when I got back here, it's not that I forgot, it's just that I wasn't focused on it. And then, because then I had to watch every Super Rugby game that I could, watch all the Queensland games. Then I saw the other teams, the Australian team, and I thought, bloody hell, there's some really good talent here. There's some skill sets here. There's some things here that I went, bloody hell, I hadn't seen. I just hadn't recognised because I wasn't focused on it. So when I got into it more, I could see, well, there's skill sets here that it does take, particularly in the forwards. I found a lot of skillful forwards in the Northern Hemisphere, in the English Premiership, but you had to work hard to get certain subtle skill sets in different ways out of them. Here they come, natural instinct's not the right word. It's there, but they have a better capacity to know how the skill works and how to use it and express it.
A bit more innate, or
in ways that learned experience through being exposed to more sports, I guess, in a different way, or variety, or we do just play that game this way in Australia. Now, they can sometimes put down a cul-de-sac of doom when you over try it and the balls don't hit and all this time, but there is skill here and some really explosively damaging types of players that have that. They don't only penetrate, they can put subtlety into their game. And I think that's really important to recognise. if we get aligned and we understand how we play our game and how we use those skill sets together, and have enough of a way that doesn't confine them but allows them to open up and become free. How do you build a structure to free someone? It's a really difficult one. How do I say, play the game, look for the offload, but don't make a mistake? It's a really tough place to coach, to get that sweet spot right. Here, you're on that side, play, then you go, when the old saying, the greatest ball players in all forms of rugby league and rugby union was what you defined by the ones you don't try, because you know when not to if you'd overplay. So how do you stop them playing and get that sweet spot right? Whereas probably the Northern Hemisphere, you're saying, okay, try it. Here we're willing to try more. There it's probably trying to build that skill set. Not massively different, but different enough to know that when I looked at it, there's some real good talent here in many ways in terms of what we have at our disposal. And I think, if we can get on the common ground and see how it goes, we're a chance to do something. Only a chance. That's all it is. So that's what I found. That talent and what I saw was really good. We don't have the massive locks, but we have a different way we use our pack and our tight five. There's a different way that our skill sets come out. We've got some very, I think, good, talented players. I'm not, size and all that can matter, but it doesn't have to be the defining capacity of what's possible. I don't think so. If you've got to find a way to make that work, and Australians are very creative and we know how to do that. And I think there's enough there to do that, to make a difference in a short period of time.
Well, I know you've got to duck out in a moment. What I will say is that if you do find the same success that you found with Ireland, I'm sure you might not be Guinness here being shouted for a month, but perhaps a bunch of 4X, and maybe that will taste, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, look, I've sampled the local brew and there's a lot of craft beers now, isn't there?
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying as well. So, no, look, if I can leave something really positive and important over my period here, I'll be really happy. For this group of players, they've invested a lot here at the Reds. The coaching team and that professional staff up there, I couldn't be, it's brilliant that what they do on a daily basis. I hope we get a dose of luck at those. Everyone can experience something really positive for themselves. Nothing's given. We know that. We'll learn everything if we get it, if we get good. But we're willing to work hard to find out. And if that's the difference I can help make with these people, I'll be happy. And I'll take a beer from anyone.
Let's kiss. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Christy. I appreciate your time.